Welcome to Topical Economics. Before we dive into today's video on market failure, make sure to subscribe to the channel and hit the bell icon so you never miss any updates on helpful economics lessons and exam tips. In this video, we will go through some past paper multiple choice questions, explain which answers are correct, and walk you through why the other options are incorrect. Let's get started and improve your understanding of market failure. Starting with first question. What is an advantage of a country having a market economic system with a large private sector? A. Firms can become unprofitable if they do not produce what consumers want. B. Market forces often fail to ensure maximum benefits for society. C. Some goods may not be provided at all or not in sufficient quantity. D. There is an unequal distribution of income which can increase over time. Reference, 2022 May-June version 1. The correct answer for this question is option A. Firms can become unprofitable if they do not produce what consumers want. In a market economy with a large private sector, firms are driven by the profit motive. This means that firms must respond to consumer demand, or they risk becoming unprofitable and going out of business. If a firm fails to produce goods and services that meet the needs or desires of consumers, it will lose customers and eventually fail to generate sufficient revenue to cover costs. This is a fundamental characteristic of a market economy. Competition and consumer preferences drive production decisions. Analyzing the other options. Option B, market forces often fail to ensure maximum benefits for society, is more applicable to situations where market failure occurs, such as with public goods or externalities, e.g., pollution. In a market economy with a large private sector, the goal is to optimize economic efficiency through market forces. Market forces can fail in certain contexts, but this is not typically considered an advantage of having a large private sector. The statement doesn't describe a direct advantage, but rather a potential downside. Next, option C, some goods may not be provided at all or not in sufficient quantity, is a potential disadvantage of a market economy, particularly with regard to public goods or goods with externalities, e.g., healthcare, education, or environmental protection. In a market system, if there is insufficient demand, or if the good is too costly for firms to produce, some goods may be underprovided or not provided at all. This is an argument against a purely market-driven system, not an advantage. Lastly, option D, there is an unequal distribution of income which can increase over time, is a well-known criticism of market economies, particularly those with a large private sector. In a market economy, income distribution can be highly unequal, leading to disparities between the wealthy and the poor. Over time, this inequality can grow if market mechanisms are not counterbalanced by redistributive policies. This is generally seen as a negative outcome of market economies, not an advantage. Moving to question 2. In recent years, a government has started to make more use of the free market system. However, they are doing it very slowly to avoid the disadvantages that a free market system might bring. What is a possible disadvantage of the free market system? A decreased incentive to work. B. Decreased levels of pollution. C. Increased efficiency. D. Increased inequality of income. Reference, 2022 May-June version 2. The correct answer for this question is option D, increased inequality of income. One of the well-known disadvantages of a free market system is that it can lead to increased inequality of income. In a market economy, income is largely determined by supply and demand for labor, capital, and other resources. This means that individuals who own scarce resources, like capital or land, or have high-demand skills can earn disproportionately more than others. Over time, this can result in greater income inequality. Wealth becomes concentrated in the hands of a few, while others may struggle to meet their basic needs, leading to a widening gap between the rich and the poor. Analyzing the other options. Option A, decreased incentive to work, is typically not considered a disadvantage of the free market system. In fact, a free market is designed to increase incentives to work by rewarding individuals based on their productivity, skills, and contributions. The profit motive and competitive nature of markets generally encourage individuals to work harder and innovate. A decreased incentive to work would be more likely in a command economy or a welfare-heavy system where people might be less motivated due to guaranteed income or benefits, which is not the case here. Next, option B, decreased levels of pollution, would generally be considered a positive outcome for society. However, in a pure free market system, pollution can often increase because firms may not internalize the negative externalities, like environmental damage, of their production processes. Without government regulation or intervention, companies may prioritize cost-cutting and profits over environmental sustainability, leading to higher levels of pollution. Therefore, the free market system does not inherently result in decreased pollution, and this is not a disadvantage. Lastly, option C, increased efficiency, is generally viewed as a positive outcome of the free market system. In competitive markets, firms are driven to produce goods and services in the most cost-effective way in order to maximize profits. This leads to better use of resources, technological innovation, and overall economic growth. It is not a disadvantage but an advantage of the free market system. Moving to question 3. What is an advantage of competitive markets? A. Competition causes inequalities of wealth. B. Competition encourages the efficient use of resources. C. The economic problem of scarcity is eliminated. D. The right quantity of merit goods is guaranteed. Reference, 2021 May-June version 2. The correct answer for this question is option B. Competition encourages the efficient use of resources. One of the primary advantages of competitive markets is that they encourage firms to use resources efficiently. In a competitive market, firms are driven by the need to maximize profits while keeping costs low, which means they have an incentive to reduce waste, improve productivity, and innovate. Consumers benefit from lower prices and higher quality products, while resources, labor, capital, materials, are allocated in ways that best meet consumer demands. This is often referred to as productive efficiency, producing goods at the lowest cost, and allocative efficiency, producing the goods that consumers want at the right price. Analyzing the other options. Option A, competition causes inequalities of wealth. While it's true that competitive markets can result in inequalities of wealth, for example, those who own capital or have valuable skills may earn much more than others, this is generally seen as a disadvantage rather than an advantage. In fact, competition tends to drive higher income inequality because not everyone has equal access to the resources needed to succeed in competitive markets. This option doesn't describe an advantage of competition. Next, option C, the economic problem of scarcity is eliminated. Scarcity refers to the basic economic problem that resources are limited while human wants are virtually unlimited. Competitive markets do not eliminate scarcity, rather, they help allocate scarce resources more efficiently. Scarcity is a fundamental condition of economics and cannot be eliminated by competition. Competitive markets only address how resources are allocated in the context of scarcity. Lastly, open D, the right quantity of merit goods is guaranteed. Merit goods are goods that the government or society may believe should be consumed more, such as education, healthcare, and public libraries. These goods are often underprovided in a purely competitive market because individuals may not fully appreciate their benefits or be willing to pay for them. In a competitive market, there is no guarantee that merit goods will be provided in the right quantity. In fact, governments often intervene to ensure the provision of these goods to correct market failures. This is a disadvantage of competitive markets, not an advantage. Moving to question 4. What is an essential feature of a market economy? A. Central planners determine what, how, and for whom to produce. B. It aims for equality in the distribution of goods and services. C. The market price reflects both the private and external costs of production. D. The price mechanism sends signals to consumers and producers to allocate resources. Reference, 2021 May-June version 3. The correct answer for this question is option D. The price mechanism sends signals to consumers and producers to allocate resources. An essential feature of a market economy is that the price mechanism plays a crucial role in allocating resources. In a market economy, prices are determined by the forces of supply and demand. When prices rise or fall, they send signals to producers and consumers about how to allocate their resources. For example, consumers respond to price changes by altering their purchasing decisions, e.g., if the price of a good rises, consumers may buy less. Producers respond by adjusting their production levels, e.g., if the price of a good rises, producers are incentivized to produce more of that good to take advantage of the higher price. The price mechanism ensures that resources are directed toward the goods and services that are most in demand, which is a fundamental characteristic of a market economy. Analyzing the other options. Option A, central planners determine what, how, and for whom to produce, describes the features of a command economy, not a market economy. In a command economy, the government or central planners make decisions about what goods and services will be produced, how they will be produced, and who will receive them. In contrast, in a market economy, these decisions are made by individuals and firms based on market forces, not central planning. Next, option B, it aims for equality in the distribution of goods and services. A market economy does not inherently aim for equality in the distribution of goods and services. In fact, market economies often result in inequalities because income and wealth are distributed based on factors like skills, labor, capital ownership, and market demand. While a market economy allocates resources efficiently, it does not guarantee an equal distribution of wealth or goods. Equality is typically pursued through government intervention or redistribution policies, not through the market itself. Lastly, option C, the market price reflects both the private and external costs of production, describes a market failure rather than a feature of a market economy. In a pure market economy, the price reflects the private costs of production, but it may not account for externalities, i.e., external costs or benefits that affect third parties, such as pollution. The failure to reflect both private and external costs is one reason why governments may intervene in a market economy, for example, by imposing taxes or regulations to address negative externalities. A true market economy does not automatically account for external costs or benefits unless specific measures are taken. Moving to question 5. What is a disadvantage of a market economic system? A. Entrepreneurs lack incentives to produce what consumers want. B. Government intervention will reduce the efficiency of firms. C. Market dominance by firms can lead to higher prices. D. There is underproduction of demerit goods. Reference, 2020 October-November version 3. The correct answer for this question is option C. Market dominance by firms can lead to higher prices. In a market economic system, competition typically drives firms to lower prices and increase efficiency. However, when firms become dominant in the market, through monopolies, oligopolies, or mergers, they can reduce competition and increase prices. This happens because dominant firms may not face sufficient competition to keep prices in check, which allows them to exploit their market power and charge higher prices for goods and services. This is a classic market failure associated with monopoly or oligopoly power, and it is one of the disadvantages of a market economy when competition is insufficient or eliminated. Analyzing the other options. Option A, entrepreneurs lack incentives to produce what consumers want, is incorrect, because entrepreneurs in a market economy are incentivized to produce what consumers want. The profit motive in a market economy drives entrepreneurs to respond to consumer preferences. If consumers want a particular good or service, entrepreneurs have a strong incentive to produce it to capture that demand and make a profit. This is one of the strengths of a market economy, not a disadvantage. Next, option B, government intervention will reduce the efficiency of firms, reflects a belief that government intervention harms efficiency, but it is not a universal disadvantage of a market economy. While excessive regulation can sometimes reduce efficiency, limited government intervention can improve market outcomes by correcting market failures, such as preventing monopolies, addressing externalities like pollution, or ensuring fair competition. In some cases, government intervention may actually increase efficiency rather than decrease it, such as when it addresses information asymmetry or public goods. Therefore, this is not a general disadvantage of market economies. Lastly, option D, there is underproduction of demerit goods, is incorrect, because in a pure market economy, there is generally overproduction of demerit goods, not underproduction. Demerit goods, e.g., cigarettes, alcohol, or junk food, are often overproduced in a market economy because consumers may underestimate the harm these goods cause. In the absence of government regulation, market forces may not fully account for the negative externalities associated with demerit goods. This is another example of market failure, but it points to overproduction, not underproduction. Moving to question 6. Cuba is implementing free market reforms. What is a likely advantage of this? A. A wider variety of goods and services produced. B. Greater equality between the different groups in society. C. Increased provision of public goods. D. Less consumption of goods with external costs. Reference, 2019 May-June version 2. The correct answer for this question is option A, a wider variety of goods and services produced. When a country like Cuba implements free market reforms, it typically shifts from a centrally planned economy, where the government controls most production, to a more market-driven system. One key advantage of this shift is that competition in the market encourages businesses to produce a wider variety of goods and services. In a free market, firms are incentivized to respond to consumer preferences and demands, which leads to innovation and the production of a diverse range of products. The increased competition among firms encourages efficiency and drives variety to meet consumer needs. In contrast, in a centrally planned economy, production is often limited and determined by the government, which can lead to fewer choices for consumers. Analyzing the other options. Option B, greater equality between the different groups in society. Here, greater equality is not typically an advantage of free market reforms. In fact, free market economies often lead to increased inequality because income is determined by market forces such as education, skills, and capital ownership. While a market economy can create wealth, it does not necessarily guarantee that wealth will be distributed equally. In fact, inequality can often rise in market economies if there are no redistribution mechanisms like taxes or social welfare programs. Next, option C, increased provision of public goods. Public goods, like national defense, public healthcare, and education, are typically provided by the government because they are non-excludable and non-rivalrous, meaning that no one can be excluded from consuming them, and one person's consumption doesn't reduce availability for others. A free market may not efficiently provide these goods, as firms have little incentive to produce goods that people can consume without paying for. In fact, free market reforms could lead to underprovision of public goods, as private firms are unlikely to supply them unless they are profitable, which is usually not the case for public goods. Lastly, option D, less consumption of goods with external costs. External costs, or negative externalities, refer to costs imposed on society that are not reflected in the price of goods, such as pollution. In a free market, firms often do not take these external costs into account, leading to overconsumption of goods that have negative externalities, e.g., cigarettes, fossil fuels, etc. While government regulation can address externalities, e.g., through taxes or environmental laws. A purely free market system does not inherently reduce the consumption of goods with external costs. In fact, the market may lead to more of these goods being consumed unless there is government intervention. Moving to question 7. What is a major advantage of a market economic system over a mixed economic system? A. All production of goods and services is determined by consumer demand. B. Ownership of resources is divided between private and public sectors. C. Producers include any external costs they create in the price of the good. D. There will always be an even distribution of income and wealth. Reference, 2018 May-June version 2. The correct answer for this question is option A. All production of goods and services is determined by consumer demand. In a market economic system, production decisions are largely driven by consumer demand. Firms produce goods and services based on what consumers want to buy, and they adjust their output based on changing preferences and demand signals in the market. Prices are determined by supply and demand, and firms respond to price changes by increasing or decreasing production. In contrast, in a mixed economic system, there is both a private sector, guided by market forces, and a public sector, where the government plays a role in decision-making, such as providing public goods, regulating industries, or addressing market failures. In a mixed system, not all production decisions are solely determined by consumer demand. The government may intervene to provide services or goods that the market does not adequately supply, e.g., healthcare, education, and infrastructure, which means production isn't entirely driven by market forces. Analyzing the other options. Option B, ownership of resources is divided between private and public sectors, is a characteristic of a mixed economic system, not a pure market economic system. In a market economy, most resources are privately owned, while in a mixed system, resources are shared between the private sector and the government. This division of ownership allows for government intervention in a mixed economy to correct market failures or provide public goods. Therefore, this is not an advantage of a market economy over a mixed economy. Next, option C, producers include any external costs they create in the price of the good, is actually a disadvantage of a pure market economy, because, in a market system, firms often do not include external costs, like pollution or resource depletion, in the price of their products. This is known as a market failure. Without government intervention, such as taxes or regulations to internalize externalities, producers may ignore external costs, leading to overproduction of goods that cause harm to society. This is why the government often plays a role in correcting such market failures in a mixed system. Lastly, option D, there will always be an even distribution of income and wealth, is a misconception about market economies. In a market economy, income distribution is not guaranteed to be even. Wealth is distributed based on individual productivity, skills, capital ownership, and other market factors, which often leads to significant inequality. In contrast, a mixed economic system may involve redistribution mechanisms, like social welfare programs, progressive taxation, etc., to reduce income inequality. So, even distribution of income and wealth is not a feature of a market economy, and this is not an advantage of it over a mixed system. Moving to question 8. What is a benefit of the free market system? A. Innovation is encouraged to increase profits. C. Negative externalities can be controlled. B. Subsidies can be used to encourage exports. D. The distribution of goods and services is fair. Reference, 2018 May-June version 3. The correct answer for this question is option A, innovation is encouraged to increase profits. In a free market system, businesses and entrepreneurs are driven by the profit motive, which incentivizes them to innovate in order to stay competitive and maximize profits. Innovation can take many forms, including the development of new products, improving production processes, or finding more efficient ways to deliver goods and services. Since firms operate in a competitive environment, they constantly seek to improve in order to meet consumer demand and differentiate themselves from competitors. This fosters technological progress and efficiency, which are major benefits of the free market system. Analyzing the other options. Option B, subsidies can be used to encourage exports, but this is generally not seen as a benefit of the free market system, but rather as a feature of government intervention in a market economy. A free market ideally minimizes government intervention, allowing market forces, supply and demand, to determine production and trade without subsidies or tariffs. The use of subsidies, financial assistance from the government, to encourage exports is a form of government intervention and is more characteristic of a mixed economy or a command economy, not a pure free market system. Next, option C, negative externalities can be controlled. Negative externalities, such as pollution, traffic congestion, or environmental damage, often arise in a free market system because firms are driven by profit and may not take the social costs of their actions into account. In a pure free market, negative externalities are not automatically controlled, and without government intervention, such as regulation or taxation, firms may continue to produce goods that harm society. This is actually a market failure, and controlling externalities typically requires government regulation, e.g., pollution taxes, environmental laws, rather than being a natural outcome of a free market system. Lastly, option D, the distribution of goods and services is fair. A free market system does not guarantee fairness in the distribution of goods and services. In fact, it can lead to significant inequality in wealth and income because goods and services are distributed based on people's ability to pay, which depends on factors like income, skills, and capital ownership. This can result in inequitable outcomes, where some people have access to much more wealth and resources than others. In contrast, a mixed economy might use government interventions, e.g., welfare, taxation, redistribution, to address these disparities and promote a fairer distribution. Moving to question 9. What is a benefit of the market system? A. Competition ensures choice for consumers. B. Prices equal supply costs. C. Unemployment is kept to a minimum. D. Wage differentials are small. Reference, 2017 October-November version 3. The correct answer for this question is option A, competition ensures choice for consumers. In a market system, competition among businesses is a key feature. Competition drives firms to offer a variety of goods and services, often leading to innovation and improvements in quality. Since consumers are able to choose between different suppliers, producers must compete by offering better prices, higher quality products, or more variety to attract customers. This competition provides consumers with more choices, which is a significant benefit of the market system. Essentially, competition gives consumers the freedom to select goods and services that best meet their needs and preferences. Analyzing the other options. Option B, prices equal supply costs, is not generally true in a market system. While market prices are influenced by supply and demand, they do not always equal supply costs. In fact, firms often set prices based on what consumers are willing to pay, and in the case of monopolies or market power, prices can be above the costs of production to generate profits. Additionally, if demand exceeds supply, prices can be higher than the cost of producing the good. This does not always lead to prices that perfectly reflect the cost of production, especially when externalities or monopolistic behavior are present. Next, option C, unemployment is kept to a minimum. Unemployment is not necessarily minimized in a market system. In fact, unemployment can fluctuate depending on the business cycle, changes in consumer demand, technological advances, and other factors. A market economy does not guarantee full employment because market forces, such as labor demand and supply, determine employment levels. While the market system can create jobs through economic growth, it also can result in unemployment during recessions or periods of economic transition. So, minimizing unemployment is not an automatic benefit of a market economy. Lastly, option D, wage differentials are small. Wage differentials in a market economy are often large, as wages are determined by factors like supply and demand for labor, skills, experience, and education. Individuals with scarce or high-demand skills, e.g., software engineers, doctors, athletes, can command much higher wages than workers in less specialized or low-demand jobs, e.g., minimum wage workers. The market system does not inherently create small wage differentials, and, in fact, income inequality is often a criticism of market economies, especially when there is little government intervention to address disparities. Moving to question 10. Which pair of economic institutions is most likely found in a market economy? A. Free accident and emergency hospitals and charities. B. Partnerships and public corporations. C. Stock exchange and monopolies. D. Trade unions and local government schools. Reference, 2016 May-June version 2. The correct answer for this question is option C, stock exchange and monopolies. In a market economy, there are typically a combination of private and public economic institutions. The correct pair, stock exchanges and monopolies, are common in market economies. Stock exchanges are essential parts of market economies because they allow companies to raise capital by selling shares to the public. Stock exchanges facilitate the buying and selling of company stocks, contributing to market liquidity and providing investors with a way to participate in corporate growth. Whereas, monopolies can also exist in a market economy, though they are generally seen as undesirable due to the lack of competition. In a free market, firms can sometimes dominate industries to the point where they become monopolies. For example, a company may control a market by having exclusive access to a resource, technology, or a highly competitive product. In a pure market economy, there is a potential for monopolies to emerge when competition is reduced, even though market forces are ideally supposed to foster competition. However, monopolies can still occur if barriers to entry or other factors prevent competitors from entering the market. Analyzing the other options. Option A, free accident and emergency hospitals and charities. Free accident and emergency hospitals are not typically found in a market economy because, in a pure market economy, healthcare services are usually paid for by consumers. These types of services would more likely be found in a mixed economy where the government provides certain essential public goods and services, such as healthcare. Charities may exist in a market economy, but they are voluntary organizations and not central institutions that shape the economy. Next, option B, partnerships and public corporations. Partnerships, private businesses owned by a small group of individuals, are indeed common in market economies. However, public corporations, firms owned by the government, are more characteristic of mixed economies. In a purely market economy, most firms are privately owned and operated for profit, while public corporations would be more common in a mixed economy where the government plays a role in ownership and management of certain industries or services, e.g., public transport, utilities, etc. Lastly, option D, trade unions and local government schools. Trade unions exist in both market and mixed economies, but they are more commonly associated with labor rights and protections in mixed economies where the government plays a role in labor laws and protections. In a purely market economy, the role of trade unions is less pronounced, as labor market forces, wages and employment conditions, are primarily determined by supply and demand. Local government schools are generally found in mixed economies where the government provides public education, rather than in a market system where education is usually private and subject to market forces. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you found this video on market failure helpful and informative. We've covered some key past paper multiple choice questions, walked through the correct answers, and discussed why the other options are incorrect. Understanding these concepts is crucial for mastering economics, and I'm glad to have had the chance to break them down for you. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon so you never miss out on more videos from Topical Economics. If you have any questions or suggestions for future topics, feel free to leave them in the comments below. Thanks again for tuning in, and I'll see you in the next video.